They laughed at the turtle because he was too slow. They said he would never win, never matter, never make it far in life. But while everyone else rushed ahead, the slowest one among them was quietly becoming the strongest. In a forest where speed was admired, quickness was praised, and victory always seemed to belong to the fastest, there lived a little turtle named Taro. Taro was not like the others. He did not run through the meadow like the rabbits. He did not leap over rocks like the deer. He did not move with the clever confidence of the foxes. He moved slowly. Every step he took looked heavy. Every journey that seemed easy for others became long and exhausting for him. By the time the rabbits had crossed the field, the deer had reached the river, and the foxes had already returned with stories of adventure, Taro was often still making his way across the same dusty path. And because of that, the forest laughed at him. They laughed when he walked. They laughed when he arrived late. They laughed when he tried to keep up with animals who seemed born for speed. To them, he was not impressive. He was not inspiring. He was simply the slow turtle, the one they joked about, the one they pitied, the one they were certain would never go far in life. At first, Taro tried not to let it bother him. He lowered his head and kept moving, pretending their words were just noise in the wind. But deep inside, every laugh left a mark. Every mocking smile made him question himself. Every careless word fed the fear that maybe they were right. Maybe he really was too slow, too weak, too far behind to ever matter. And yet, there was something the forest did not understand. The little turtle may have been slow, but he had a kind of strength that speed could not see. Because every day he kept going, even when progress felt invisible. Every day he kept moving, even when no one noticed his effort. Every day he chose patience over frustration, endurance over shame, and quiet persistence over giving up. One morning, the forest buzzed with excitement. A grand race had been announced. It was not just any race. It was called the Race of Life, a challenge that would take the animals across the meadow, through the rocky hills, over the old wooden bridge, and finally to the great hilltop tree at the edge of the forest. Whoever reached the tree first would be celebrated as the champion of the year. The rabbits were thrilled. The deer stretched proudly. The foxes grinned with confidence. And then, to everyone's surprise, Taro stepped forward. The laughter came immediately. A rabbit nearly fell over laughing. A fox smirked. The monkeys hanging from the trees clapped and mocked him openly. "How will the turtle race?" they whispered. "At this speed. He'll still be walking when the moon comes out." But Taro did not step back. He knew they saw his slowness. He knew they expected him to fail. He knew he looked like the least likely animal in the forest to ever win anything. Still, he said quietly, "I know I am slow, but I still want to try." The laughter only grew louder. That evening, carrying the weight of everyone's doubt, Taro wandered to the edge of the forest and reached a quiet pond, hidden behind tall reeds. There lived an old tortoise named Soma. Soma had lived longer than any animal in the forest. His shell was worn by time, and his eyes carried the calm wisdom of someone who had survived storms, loss, and long seasons of waiting. When Soma saw the sadness in Taro's face, he asked, "Why do you look as though the race has already defeated you?" Taro lowered his head. "Everyone thinks I'm a joke," he said. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I was never meant to win anything." Soma was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me, Taro, does the mountain become weak because it stands still? Does the river become foolish because it takes time to carve stone? Taro looked up, confused. Soma smiled gently. The forest worships speed because speed is easy to notice, he said. But patience is quiet. It does not impress the crowd in the beginning. It does not create applause. But patience builds something that rushing often cannot. Taro listened carefully. It builds endurance, Soma said. It builds discipline. It builds the strength to continue when everyone else has already burned themselves out. Then Soma looked straight into Taro's eyes and said words he would never forget. Never be ashamed of moving slowly, if you are still moving. Those words settled deep into Taro's heart. That night, while the forest slept, Taro made a promise to himself. He might not be the fastest, he might not be the strongest, he might not be anyone's favorite to win, but he would not quit. The next morning, the race began. The animals lined up beneath a bright golden sky. The rabbits bounced with excitement. The deer stamped their hooves into the earth. The foxes stood low and focused, ready to sprint. And at the far end of the line stood Taro, small, quiet, and already forgotten by most. A loud cry signaled the start. In an instant, the race exploded into motion. The rabbits shot forward like arrows. The deer leaped across the meadow. The foxes dashed ahead with sharp determination. Within seconds, Taro was alone at the back. Dust settled around him as the others disappeared into the distance. The animals watching from the sidelines laughed. "Look at him," one monkey said. "The race has barely begun, and he's already lost." Taro heard them, but this time he did not let their laughter enter his heart. He took one step, then another, and another, slowly, steadily. He moved forward. The meadow stretched endlessly before him. The sun climbed higher. The ground grew hot beneath his feet, but Taro kept moving. When he finally reached the rocky hills, he found the first signs of trouble. One rabbit sat panting beneath a tree, exhausted. He had sprinted too hard at the beginning and drained all his energy too quickly. Farther ahead, a deer had twisted his leg trying to leap too fast across the rocks. A fox, impatient and clever, had taken a dangerous shortcut and become trapped in a patch of thorns. Taro paused as he passed them. The rabbit looked at him in disbelief and asked, "How are you still going?" Taro looked at the steep hill ahead and answered softly, "Because I never expected it to be easy." And then he kept walking. Step by step, he climbed the hill. His legs trembled. His shell felt heavier than ever. At times, the path was so steep that he nearly slipped backward. And with every difficult step, the old voices returned. "You are too slow. You are too late. You will never win." But each time doubt whispered, Taro answered it with action. Another step, another breath, another inch forward. By the time he reached the old wooden bridge, dark clouds had begun to gather overhead. The wind rose. Thunder rolled in the distance. The river below the bridge rushed wildly after the first heavy drops of rain. Some of the faster animals had already reached the bridge and stopped. They were afraid to cross. The planks swayed violently in the wind. Rain soaked the wood. The bridge creaked over the roaring water below. A fox shook his head. "No one is crossing that." A rabbit backed away. "This race is over." Taro stood at the edge of the bridge, trembling. One strong gust of wind could knock him over. One broken plank could send him crashing into the river. Fear rose inside him. Every part of him wanted to turn back. But then he remembered Soma's words. Never be ashamed of moving slowly, if you are still moving. So Taro stepped onto the bridge. The wood groaned beneath him. Rain poured across his shell. Wind pushed against his body. The river roared below like a warning. Halfway across, a plank cracked beneath one of his feet. Taro slipped. For one terrifying moment, it felt as though the river would swallow him whole. But he caught himself. He held on. He breathed. And then he kept going. One careful step, then another and another. By the time he reached the other side, the animals stared at him in silence. Not because he was fast, not because he was strong, but because he had done something many of them could not. He had kept moving through fear. Now the race was no longer about speed. It was about endurance. The rabbits were tired. The deer were hurting. The foxes were frustrated. Some had already given up. But Taro kept walking, through mud, through rain, through pain. As evening approached, the storm began to clear, and far in the distance, the hilltop tree came into view. Taro's body ached. His legs burned. His neck felt stiff. His eyes were heavy. But his spirit had changed. He was no longer racing against the others. He was racing against the part of himself that once believed he could never finish. The final climb to the hilltop tree was the hardest of all. The path was steep and slippery. Every step demanded effort. Every breath felt heavier than the last. At one point, Taro stopped and looked down. The forest stretched far below him. And for a moment the thought returned. What if I'm still not enough? What if I've come all this way only to fail at the end? But then he looked behind him. He saw the meadow he had crossed, the hills he had climbed, the bridge he had survived, the storm he had endured. And suddenly, he understood something powerful. He had already become more than the animals had ever believed he could be. Maybe victory was not only standing at the finish line first. Maybe victory was becoming the kind of soul who does not quit when life becomes difficult. Taro lifted his head, and with the last of his strength, he climbed. Step by step, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat, until finally, he reached the top. The great hilltop tree stood before him, glowing in the soft golden light of sunset. And beneath it, to the astonishment of the entire forest, stood Taro, the little turtle everyone had mocked, the one they said would never go far, the one they called too slow, the one they laughed at before the race had even begun. He had made it, not because he was the fastest, not because life had been easy on him, not because he had some special advantage. He had made it because he kept going when others stopped. One by one, the animals gathered below the hill. The rabbits stared in disbelief. The deer lowered their heads. The foxes stood speechless. And Soma, watching from a distance, smiled with quiet pride. The forest had spent so long measuring worth by speed that it had forgotten a greater truth. A slow step in the right direction is still progress.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe so that we can bring more motivational videos for you.